The stagecoach lurched violently to one side, and Miranda Osborne felt her stomach drop as the driver's panicked shout cut through the howling wind that had been growing steadily stronger for the past hour. She pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, trying to see through the white chaos outside. But the November snowstorm had transformed the Arizona landscape into an impenetrable wall of swirling white. This was supposed to be her new beginning, a journey from Boston to Winslow, Arizona, where a rancher named Howard Pratt waited to marry her. She had seen his photograph, read his carefully penned letters promising a good life, and made the decision that so many women before her had made. She would become a mail-order bride, leaving behind the suffocating confines of her aunt's home and the whispers about her unmarried state at 22 years old. The stagecoach jerked again, this time more violently, and Miranda heard the driver cursing above the wind. Then came a sickening crack, the sound of wood splintering, and suddenly she was thrown forward as the coach tilted at an impossible angle. Her carpetbag flew across the small space, striking the opposite wall as she scrambled for purchase. The coach shuddered to a stop, listing heavily to one side. Miss, are you all right in there?" The driver's voice was muffled, barely audible over the storm's fury. Miranda pushed herself up, her shoulder aching from where it had struck the seat. "I'm fine. What happened? Axle's broken and we've lost a wheel. This storm came out of nowhere. I've driven this route for 15 years, and I've never seen snow like this in Arizona, not in November." She struggled to open the door, which was now partially blocked by a snowdrift that had formed in the few minutes since they had stopped. The driver appeared, his face red from the cold, ice already forming in his graying beard. "We're about 8 miles outside of Winslow," he said, his voice tight with worry. "I need to stay with the horses, try to calm them. There's a ranch not too far from here, the Zerks' place. If you head northeast, you might be able to make it on foot. You want me to walk? In this?" Miranda stared at him in disbelief, but even as she spoke, she could see the fear in his eyes. The horses were wild-eyed and panicking, and one of them had a nasty gash on its foreleg. "Miss, I've got to tend to these animals and I can't leave them. You're young and strong. Take your warmest things and head that way." He pointed into the white void. "Look for a fence line. Follow it north. The Zerks' ranch should be there. It's your best chance." Miranda wanted to argue, wanted to insist that they stay together, but she could see the logic in his words even as terror gripped her heart. She gathered her heaviest cloak, wrapped a scarf around her face, and stuffed what money she had into her bodice. The driver gave her a canteen of water and a direction, and then she was stumbling into the storm, leaving the relative shelter of the broken stagecoach behind. The cold was immediate and brutal. The wind tore at her cloak, finding every gap and seam, turning her fingers numb within minutes despite her gloves. She trudged forward, each step an effort as snow accumulated around her boots. The world had been reduced to white noise and stinging ice crystals, and Miranda quickly lost all sense of direction. She thought she was heading northeast, but the storm disoriented her, turning the landscape into an endless expanse of white. Time lost meaning. She might have been walking for 10 minutes or an hour. Her legs burned with effort, and her lungs ached from breathing the frigid air. She called out several times, her voice swallowed by the wind, hoping against hope that someone might hear her. But there was nothing, only the relentless storm and her own labored breathing. When her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow and she fell, Miranda lay there for a moment, exhausted and terrified. "Get up," a voice in her mind commanded. "Get up or you'll die here." She forced herself to her knees, then to her feet, and kept walking. She had survived her parents' deaths, had survived the cold dismissal of relatives who saw her as a burden, had survived the loneliness of Boston society balls where she was pitied as the orphan with no prospects. She would survive this too, but the cold was insidious, and as she walked, Miranda felt her thoughts beginning to slow, her movements becoming sluggish. She knew these were dangerous signs, but she could not seem to make her body respond with the urgency it needed. She stumbled again, caught herself against what felt like a fence post, and clung to it like a lifeline. The sound of hoofbeats was so faint at first that she thought she had imagined it, a desperate hallucination conjured by her freezing mind. But then it came again, stronger, and a dark shape materialized in the white chaos. A horse, massive and dark, with a rider who seemed to be one with the storm itself. "Help!" Miranda tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, torn away by the wind. The rider pulled up short, and through her blurred vision, Miranda saw him dismount with swift, practiced movements. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face partially hidden by a heavy scarf and wide-brimmed hat crusted with ice and snow. "Madam, what in God's name are you doing out here?" His voice was deep, rough with concern and what might have been anger. "Stagecoach," she managed to say. "Broken. Driver said to find the Xerxes Ranch." "Jesus Christ," the man muttered. He swept her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing, and Miranda was too cold and exhausted to protest. He settled her in front of him on the horse, wrapping his heavy coat around her, and she felt the warmth of his body like a furnace at her back. "Hold on to me. We're not far from the ranch." Miranda did as he said, her frozen fingers clutching at his shirt. She felt the horse begin to move, felt the steady rise and fall of the man's chest against her back, and despite her fear and exhaustion, she felt a flicker of hope. Someone had found her. She was not going to die alone in the snow. The ride felt both endless and impossibly short. Miranda drifted in and out of awareness, her body beginning to shake violently as her core temperature continued to drop. The man holding her kept talking, his voice a low rumble that she felt more than heard. "Stay with me. We're almost there. You're going to be fine. Stay awake." Then there were lights, golden and welcoming, and the horse was stopping. The man dismounted, pulling Miranda down with him, and she caught a glimpse of a large ranch house before he was carrying her up wooden steps and through a door into blessed warmth. "Rosie, Rosie, get in here now," he bellowed, and a moment later a plump Mexican woman with graying hair appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of Miranda. "Madre de Dios, Zeke, what happened?" "Found her about a mile out, half frozen. Her stagecoach broke down." "Get some blankets and warm water and stoke up the fire in the guest room." Rosie disappeared, already calling out orders to someone else in the house. The man, Zeke, carried Miranda through a warm, well-furnished parlor and into a bedroom where a fire was already crackling in the hearth. Rosie reappeared with an armload of quilts and blankets, and another woman, younger with kind eyes, followed with a basin of water. "We need to warm her up slowly," Rosie said, her voice taking on a tone of authority. "Too fast and it will hurt her. Zeke, you go on and take care of your horse." "We'll handle this." Zeke hesitated, and Miranda caught his eyes for the first time. They were a startling blue-gray, intense and intelligent, set in a face that was all hard planes and sharp angles, weathered by sun and wind. His dark hair was damp from melted snow, and there was a scar above his left eyebrow that gave him a dangerous look. "She going to be all right?" he asked Rosie, but his eyes stayed on Miranda. "She will be, thanks to you. Now go on before you track more snow all through my clean house." Zeke nodded once, gave Miranda one last searching look, and left. Rosie and the younger woman, who introduced herself as Maria, Rosie's daughter, began the careful process of removing Miranda's wet, frozen clothing and wrapping her in warm, dry blankets. They brought her sips of warm broth and rubbed her hands and feet gently to restore circulation. The pain as feeling returned to her extremities was intense, and Miranda bit her lip to keep from crying out. "You are very lucky," Rosie said, her accented English warm and soothing. "Another hour out there and even Mr. Zeke would not have been able to save you. What were you doing out in such a storm?" Miranda's teeth chattered as she tried to answer. "I was on my way to Winslow, to marry a man there, Howard Pratt. The stagecoach broke down and the driver told me to walk to the Xerxes ranch." Rosie and Maria exchanged glances. "Well, you found it," Rosie said. "This is the Xerxes ranch. Mr. Zeke is Zeke Xerxes. He owns all this land, hundreds of acres. You are safe now." As the warmth slowly returned to her body and the shaking subsided, Miranda felt exhaustion pulling at her like a lead weight. Her eyes drifted closed despite her best efforts to stay awake. "Sleep now," Rosie said softly, pulling the blankets up higher. "You are safe here. Sleep." Miranda surrendered to the darkness, her last conscious thought a memory of strong arms carrying her, and a deep voice promising she would be fine. When Miranda woke, sunlight was streaming through lace curtains, creating patterns on the wooden floor. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. Then memory flooded back, the storm, the terrible cold, and the man on horseback who had found her. She sat up slowly, testing her body for damage. Her muscles ached, and her fingers and toes tingled uncomfortably, but she seemed to be in one piece. Someone had dressed her in a soft cotton nightgown, and her own clothes were nowhere to be seen. The room was simply but comfortably furnished, with a large wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, and the bed she was lying in, which was easily the most comfortable bed she had ever experienced. A soft knock on the door preceded Rosie's entrance. The older woman's face broke into a warm smile when she saw Miranda awake. "Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. You have slept for almost 18 hours." 18 hours, Miranda repeated, shocked. "Your body needed the rest. How do you feel?" "Sore, but alive." "Thanks to you and Mr. Xerxes." Rosie brought over a tray with eggs, toast, bacon, and coffee. The smell made Miranda's stomach growl audibly, and Rosie laughed. "Eat first, then we will talk. Your clothes are clean and dry, hanging in the wardrobe. I took the liberty of pressing them." Miranda ate ravenously, surprised by her own hunger. As she ate, Rosie bustled around the room, opening the curtains wider and tidying things that did not need tidying. When Miranda had finished every bite, Rosie sat down in the chair by the bed. "The storm has passed," she said. "Mr. Zeke rode out at first light to check on your stagecoach driver. He found the man safe, though cold and miserable. The horses are being tended to in our barn. The stagecoach itself is badly damaged and will need significant repairs. Mr. Zeke has sent word to Winslow about what happened, including a message to Mr. Pratt, the man you were coming to marry." Miranda's heart sank. Howard Pratt. In the terror and exhaustion of the previous day, she had almost forgotten the purpose of her journey. What did the message say? Only that you were safe and recovering here, and that arrangements would be made to get you to Winslow as soon as possible. Mr. Pratt sent a reply this morning. He is glad you are safe and says he will come to collect you himself in 3 days' time, once he has finished some urgent business with his cattle. 3 days. Miranda should have felt relief, but instead, she felt a strange mixture of emotions she could not quite name. "I see. That's very kind of him." Rosie studied her with shrewd dark eyes. "You have not met this man, have you? This Mr. Pratt?" "No, we corresponded by letters. He sent a photograph." "And you agreed to marry him based on letters and a photograph?" Miranda felt herself bristle slightly at the implied criticism. "Many women do. It's a perfectly respectable arrangement, I had no family left in Boston, no prospects. Mr. Pratt seemed like a good man from his letters. He owns a ranch, has a stable income. He promised I would want for nothing. Rosie's expression softened. Forgive me, child. I did not mean to judge. I came to this country as a young woman myself, and I know what it is to make difficult choices for survival. I only hope that Mr. Pratt is truly the good man you believe him to be. There was something in Rosie's tone that made Miranda uneasy, but before she could question it further, there was another knock on the door. Rosie called out permission to enter, and Zeke Xerxes stepped into the room. In the daylight, without the storm raging around him, he was even more imposing than Miranda remembered. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who made his living through physical labor. He had changed out of his snow-covered clothes and now wore dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, corded forearms, and a leather vest. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his blue-gray eyes were sharp and assessing as they took her in. "Miss Osborne," he said, his voice that same deep rumble she remembered from the storm. "I'm glad to see you're recovering." "Thanks to you, Mr. Xerxes," Miranda said, acutely aware that she was sitting in bed in a borrowed nightgown, her hair undoubtedly a mess. "I owe you my life. If you hadn't found me when you did, I would have frozen to death out there." He waved off her gratitude with a slight gesture of his hand. "Any decent person would have done the same. I was out checking the southern fence line when I saw the storm coming in. I was heading back when I spotted you." "Lucky timing, nothing more." "I don't believe in luck," Miranda said. "I believe you saved my life, and I'm grateful." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she could not quite read. He nodded once, a sharp, economical movement. "Your stagecoach driver is safe. He's resting in the bunkhouse with my ranch hands. The horses are being cared for. Your belongings from the stagecoach have been brought here. Rosie will show you where they are." "Thank you." Rosie mentioned that Mr. Pratt sent word that he would collect me in 3 days. "That's right." Was it her imagination, or did his jaw tighten slightly at the mention of Howard Pratt's name? "You're welcome to stay here as my guest until then. Rosie and Maria will see to anything you need. I don't want to impose on your hospitality any more than I already have." "You're not imposing. This ranch is large and we have plenty of room. Consider it settled." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "Rest as much as you need, Miss Osborne. Recovering from exposure to that kind of cold takes time." Then he was gone, his boots echoing on the wooden floor as he walked away. Rosie made a small, knowing sound in her throat, and when Miranda looked at her, the older woman was watching her with an expression that was far too knowing. "What?" Miranda asked. "Nothing, child. Nothing at all. Now let me help you get dressed and I will show you around the house. If you are to be here for 3 days, you might as well be comfortable." Over the next few hours, Miranda learned that the Xerxes ranch was indeed impressive. The house itself was large and well built, with wood floors, plastered walls, and solid furniture that spoke of both quality and practicality. There was a large kitchen that was clearly Rosie's domain, a formal dining room that looked rarely used, a parlor with comfortable chairs and shelves lined with books, and several bedrooms upstairs. Outside, the ranch sprawled across the landscape, with a large barn, stables, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and various other outbuildings. Rosie explained that Zeke's father, Josiah Xerxes, had come to Arizona Territory in 1868, right after the Civil War, and had built the ranch from nothing. He had married a local woman, Catherine, and they had had one son, Zeke, born in 1869. Josiah had died 5 years ago, and Catherine had followed him within a year, leaving everything to Zeke, who was now 27 years old. Mr. Zeke, he runs this ranch like his father did, with a firm hand but a fair one, Rosie said as they stood in the kitchen while she prepared the evening meal. He treats his workers well, pays them on time, and never asks them to do anything he would not do himself. But he is alone too much, I think. A man his age should have a wife, children. This house is too quiet. Miranda sensed the direction Rosie's thoughts were taking and felt compelled to redirect them. I'm sure he'll marry when he finds the right woman. Perhaps, Rosie said, but her tone suggested she thought Miranda was being deliberately obtuse. That evening, Miranda joined Zeke for dinner in the formal dining room. It felt strange, sitting at the long table with him at one end and her at the other, Rosie serving them roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the clink of silverware against plates. Finally, Zeke spoke. Rosie tells me you're from Boston. Yes, I lived there all my life until now. What made you decide to come west as a mail-order bride? Miranda hesitated, unsure how much to share. But there was something about Zeke's direct gaze that invited honesty. I was orphaned when I was 17. My parents died in a fire. I went to live with my aunt and uncle, but I was more of a burden to them than family. They gave me a roof over my head and food to eat, but they made it clear I was there on sufferance. When I turned 21, my uncle suggested it was time I found a husband or found another place to live. But I had no dowry, no prospects, and the men who showed interest in me were either too old, already married, or looking for someone they could control completely. I saw an advertisement for a matrimonial service, and Howard Pratt's letter seemed genuine and kind, so I took the chance. Zeke was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. That took courage, or desperation, Miranda said with a slight self-deprecating smile. One doesn't preclude the other. Most of the best decisions in life come from a combination of both. He took a sip of his wine. What do you know about Howard Pratt? He owns a ranch outside of Winslow. He's 35 years old, never been married. He wrote that he was looking for a wife who could help him run his household and possibly his business affairs. He seemed intelligent and respectful in his letters. He's all of those things, Zeke said slowly. I've known Howard for about 10 years. Our ranches aren't far apart. He's a good rancher, knows his business. But, Miranda prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in his voice. Zeke set down his fork and met her eyes directly. But he's also a hard man. Demanding. He expects things done his way, on his schedule. He's been through 3 housekeepers in the past 2 years because none of them could meet his standards. I'm not saying he's cruel, but he's not an easy man to live with. Miranda felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Why are you telling me this? Because you almost died yesterday, and in that moment when I found you in the snow, you were my responsibility. I pulled you back from the edge, and I feel some obligation to make sure you know what you're walking into. Howard Pratt is not a bad man, but you should go into this marriage with your eyes open. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Xerxes, but I entered into this arrangement willingly. I knew I was taking a risk. Women like me don't have the luxury of waiting for love matches. Sometimes practicality has to be enough. Does it? Zeke asked quietly. Does practicality really have to be enough? The intensity in his gaze made Miranda's breath catch. She looked away, focusing on her plate. For women like me, yes, it does. The rest of the meal passed in near silence, the tension between them thick and complicated. When Rosie cleared the plates and brought out apple pie for dessert, the sweetness of the dessert did nothing to cut through the strange, charged atmosphere. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in the guest room, Miranda stared at the ceiling and tried to understand the confusion of emotions swirling inside her. She should be thinking about Howard Pratt, about her impending marriage and her new life in Winslow. Instead, her mind kept returning to Zeke Xerxes, to the feeling of his arms around her in the storm, to the way he had looked at her across the dinner table with those penetrating blue-gray eyes. She told herself it was simply gratitude, a natural response to being saved. But deep down, she knew it was more than that, and the knowledge terrified her. She could not afford to develop feelings for Zeke. In 3 days, Howard Pratt would arrive to collect her, and she would marry him and begin her new life. Whatever she was feeling now was irrelevant, a complication she could not afford. But knowing that and making her heart accept it were two very different things. The next day dawned clear and cold, the sun shining brilliantly on the snow-covered landscape. Miranda woke feeling restless and confined. She dressed in her own clothes, grateful to have them clean and pressed, and made her way downstairs. Rosie was in the kitchen, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. "Good morning. You slept better, I think?" "Yes, thank you." "Where is Mr. Xerxes?" "Out working, as always. That man, he never stops. Up before dawn, working until after dark. I tell him he will work himself into an early grave, but does he listen?" "No." Rosie shook her head, but there was affection in her voice. Miranda ate breakfast, then spent the morning in the parlor, trying to read one of the many books on Zeke's shelves. But she could not concentrate, her mind wandering, her gaze drifting to the windows that looked out over the ranch. She could see men working in the distance, moving between buildings, tending to animals. She wondered which one was Zeke. Around midday, Rosie found her staring out the window and clucked her tongue. "You are restless, I can see. Why don't you go for a walk? The sun is shining, and you have been cooped up inside too long. Just don't go far and stay where you can see the house." Miranda agreed readily, grateful for the excuse to get outside. Rosie lent her a heavy coat, scarf, and sturdy boots, and Miranda stepped out into the crisp winter air. The cold bit at her cheeks, but it was invigorating rather than frightening, nothing like the deadly storm of 2 days before. She walked around the main house, admiring the solid construction and the care that had clearly been put into maintaining everything. Then she wandered toward the stables, drawn by the sound of horses. The building was large and well kept, with individual stalls lining both sides of a central aisle. Several horses poked their heads out to watch her pass, and Miranda stopped to stroke the velvet nose of a pretty chestnut mare. "She's gentle," a voice said behind her, and Miranda turned to find Zeke standing in the doorway, backlit by the sun. "Her name is Cinnamon. She was my mother's horse." "She's beautiful," Miranda said, continuing to pet the mare, who was nuzzling her hand looking for treats. Zeke walked closer, and Miranda was aware of how he moved, with a kind of easy, unconscious grace despite his size. He pulled a carrot from his pocket and handed it to Miranda. "Here, she'll love you forever if you give her this." Miranda took the carrot and offered it to Cinnamon, who crunched it happily. Zeke leaned against the stall door, watching. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "Much better. Restless, actually. I'm not used to being idle." "What did you do in Boston, before you decided to come west?" "I worked as a seamstress for a dressmaker. I was fairly skilled at it, actually. I enjoyed the work, the precision and creativity it required. But it didn't pay well, and the hours were long. My aunt thought it was beneath me, that I should be trying harder to find a husband instead. Seems to me a woman who can support herself with a skill has more sense than one who just sits around waiting to be married off." Miranda smiled. "I wish my aunt had shared your perspective." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Zeke said, "Would you like to see more of the ranch? I could saddle up Cinnamon for you, and we could ride out a bit. The scenery is beautiful after the snow. Miranda knew she should say no. She should maintain a proper distance from Zeke, should remember that she was promised to another man. But the temptation was too strong. I would like that very much. Zeke saddled both Cinnamon and his own horse, a massive black gelding named Shadow. He helped Miranda mount, his hands strong and sure on her waist, and then they were riding out into the clear winter day. The ranch stretched out before them, acres of snow-covered land dotted with cattle and bordered by distant mountains. Zeke pointed out various landmarks, explained the workings of the ranch, told her stories about his father and the early days when the ranch was just a dream and a lot of hard work. Miranda found herself laughing at his stories, relaxing in his company in a way she had not relaxed in years. He was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor and an intelligence that showed in everything he said. She told him more about her life in Boston, about the parents she barely remembered except for vague impressions of warmth and laughter, about the loneliness of living with relatives who saw her as an obligation. They rode for over an hour, and when they finally turned back toward the ranch house, Miranda felt something inside her shifting, a crack forming in the careful walls she had built around her heart. That evening, she joined Zeke for dinner again, and this time the conversation flowed easily. They talked about books, having discovered they had similar tastes, about the differences between Eastern and Western life, about his plans for expanding the ranch and her hopes for what her new life might bring. Rosie watched them from the doorway to the kitchen, a small, satisfied smile on her face. After dinner, Zeke invited Miranda into the parlor, and they sat by the fire, continuing their conversation. At some point the talk drifted into silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who are at ease with each other. Miranda found herself studying Zeke in the firelight, the strong lines of his face, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, Miranda startled, realizing she had been staring. "I was thinking that I'm grateful the storm brought me here, even though it was terrifying at the time. I'm grateful to have met you." Zeke's expression grew serious. "Miranda," he said, using her first name for the first time, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her shiver. "I need to tell you something, and I don't know if I should, but I think I'll regret it forever if I don't." Her heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense on hers. "I can't stop thinking about you. From the moment I found you in that storm, something inside me shifted. I know you're promised to Howard Pratt. I know you have an agreement with him, and I have no right to interfere. But I also know that in the time you've been here, I've felt more alive, more myself than I have in years. And I hope, that you might feel something too." Miranda's breath caught. Every rational thought in her head told her to shut this down, to remind him and herself that she had made a commitment. But her heart, her traitorous heart, was singing. "Zeke," she whispered, "I do feel something, but I don't know what to do about it. I gave my word to Mr. Pratt. I agreed to marry him. Agreements can be broken if they're not right. You haven't married him yet. You've never even met him. You don't owe him anything beyond honesty." "But I owe myself something," Miranda said, her voice shaking slightly. "I owe myself the security and stability that marriage to Mr. Pratt would provide. I can't just throw that away based on feelings I've had for 2 days." "Why not?" Zeke challenged. "Why can't you trust what you feel? I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Miranda. I'm just asking you not to marry Howard until you're sure it's what you really want. Give us a chance. Give yourself a chance to see if what's between us is real." Miranda stood up abruptly, needing to put distance between them, needing to think. "This is happening too fast. 3 days ago, I didn't know you existed. And now you're asking me to throw away my entire plan, my future, based on what? A few conversations. A feeling. Zeke stood as well, but he didn't move toward her. I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's a reason that storm brought you here. Maybe it wasn't just chance. Maybe it was fate giving you an option you didn't know you had. I don't believe in fate, Miranda said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then believe in possibility. Believe in the chance that you could have more than just security and stability. Believe that you could have happiness, partnership, love. The word hung between them, heavy and significant. Love. Was that what this was? Could love even develop this quickly? I need to think, Miranda said finally. I need time to sort through what I'm feeling. Zeke nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Miranda, know this. If you decide to go with Howard tomorrow, I won't stop you, but I will always wonder what might have been. And I think you will too. That night, Miranda lay awake until the early hours of the morning, her mind spinning in circles. Part of her insisted that Zeke was right, that she should follow her heart, take the risk. But another part, the practical part that had kept her safe and surviving all these years, reminded her that feelings were fleeting, that security was more valuable than romance, that she would be a fool to throw away a solid arrangement for the uncertainty of new emotions. By the time dawn broke, she was no closer to a decision. She rose, dressed, and went downstairs to find Rosie already in the kitchen. You look like you did not sleep, Rosie observed. Coffee, please, Miranda said gratefully, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. Rosie poured her a cup and sat down across from her. Mr. Zeke, he spoke to you last night. It was not a question. Miranda looked up at the older woman. How did you know? Because I know Mr. Zeke. I have known him since he was a boy. And I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Also, because I may have been listening at the door. Rosie had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I am an old woman. I am allowed to be nosy. Despite everything, Miranda felt a smile tug at her lips. What am I supposed to do, Rosie? That is not for me to say, child, but I will tell you this. Mr. Howard Pratt, he is not a bad man, but he is not a warm man. He will provide for you, give you a home, treat you with respect, probably. But I do not think he will make you happy. Mr. Zeke, on the other hand, he is a good man with a good heart. He works hard, yes, but he also knows how to laugh, how to care for people. He took me in when I had nowhere to go, gave me and my Maria a home and work and respect. He could make you happy, I think, if you let him. But I barely know him. You know him enough to trust him with your heart, or you would not be so torn. Sometimes, child, knowing comes quick. My husband, God rest his soul, I knew him 3 days before I agreed to marry him. We had 32 years together, and every one of them was a blessing. Miranda sipped her coffee, turning Rosie's words over in her mind. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of hoofbeats outside. Rosie went to the window and looked out. A rider is coming. I think it is Mr. Pratt. Miranda's heart sank. He was a day early. She stood up quickly, suddenly acutely aware that she was still in her simple morning dress, her hair hastily pinned. I thought he wasn't coming until tomorrow. Sometimes plans change, Rosie said. Come, let us go meet him. They went out onto the front porch just as Howard Pratt dismounted from a handsome bay horse. He was tall, though not as tall as Zeke, with sandy brown hair and a neat mustache. He was dressed well in a dark suit and wore an expensive-looking hat. He was handsome in a conventional way, with regular features and clear brown eyes. Miss Osborne, he said, climbing the steps and removing his hat. I hope I haven't startled you by arriving early. I finished my business sooner than expected and was anxious to ensure you were well. Mr. Pratt, Miranda said, extending her hand, which he took and shook formally. I'm fine, thanks to Mr. Xerxes. He saved my life. Yes, I heard about your ordeal. It must have been terrifying. I'm grateful to Xerxes for his timely intervention. His tone was polite, but somehow distant, as if he were discussing a business transaction rather than a near-death experience. At that moment, Zeke came around the corner of the house, clearly having been working in one of the outbuildings. He stopped when he saw Howard, and the two men regarded each other for a long moment. "Howard," Zeke said, his voice carefully neutral. "Zeke," Howard replied with the same neutrality. "Thank you for taking care of Miss Osborne. I'm here to collect her now and take her to Winslow so we can proceed with our arrangements." Miranda felt something inside her recoil at his phrasing. Collect her and proceed with our arrangements, as if she were a package to be picked up and a business deal to be executed. "Miss Osborne is welcome to stay as long as she likes," Zeke said, his eyes finding Miranda's. "She's been no trouble at all. In fact, she's been wonderful company." The subtext was clear to everyone present. Howard's expression tightened slightly. "I'm sure she has been. But Miss Osborne and I have an agreement, and I've been patient long enough. I think it's time we moved forward with our plans." Miranda found herself in the strange position of being discussed as if she were not there. She stepped forward, drawing both men's attention. "Mr. Pratt, I appreciate you coming for me, but I think we need to talk before I go anywhere." Howard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Talk? What is there to discuss? We've already made our arrangements." "Perhaps we could speak privately," Miranda suggested, very aware of Zeke and Rosie watching. Howard nodded curtly. "Of course. Shall we walk?" They descended the porch steps and walked a short distance from the house. When they were out of earshot, Howard turned to face her. "What is this about, Miss Osborne? Are you having second thoughts?" Miranda took a deep breath. "I don't know, Mr. Pratt. I'll be honest with you. In the time I've been here, I've realized that perhaps I rushed into this arrangement without thinking it through completely." His expression grew cold. "I see. And would this sudden realization have anything to do with Zeke Xerxes?" "It has to do with me realizing that I don't know you at all and you don't know me. We exchanged letters, but that's not the same as truly knowing a person." "I disagree," Howard said stiffly. "I know everything I need to know. You are educated, well-mannered, young, and healthy. You need a home and security, and I need a wife to manage my household. That's more than many marriages are built on." "Is that really all you want in a marriage? Someone to manage your household?" "What else is there?" Howard asked, genuinely seeming puzzled by the question. "I'm offering you a comfortable life, Miss Osborne. A nice home, financial security, respect in the community. You could do far worse." "But could I do better?" Miranda asked softly. Howard's jaw tightened. "If you're referring to Xerxes, I'll tell you right now that he's not the man you think he is. He may seem charming and heroic now, but he's a loner, set in his ways. He's had opportunities to marry half a dozen times and never followed through. He'll never commit to anyone." "That's not true," a voice said behind them, and they both turned to see Zeke standing there. "I never committed to anyone before because I never found anyone worth committing to. Until now." "Xerxes, this is none of your business," Howard snapped. "It's entirely my business," Zeke replied evenly, walking up to stand next to Miranda. "Because I'm in love with her." The words hung in the air, and Miranda felt her heart stop, then start again at double speed. Zeke turned to look at her, his blue-gray eyes intense and sincere. "I know it's fast. I know it seems crazy, but I also know that when I found you in that storm, something shifted inside me. I've spent the last 2 days getting to know you, talking with you, and every moment has only confirmed what I felt in that first instant. I love you, Miranda. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just an arrangement. I want partnership and laughter and arguments and reconciliation and all of it. I want you to be my wife. Not because it's practical, but because I can't imagine my life without you now." Miranda felt tears pricking her eyes. She looked at Howard, who was staring at Zeke with undisguised anger and then back at Zeke. "You really mean that? Every word? I'll always find you, Miranda. In a storm, in a crowd, in the darkest night. I'll always find you because you're meant to be found by me." It was the echo of words he had spoken in the storm, words she had barely registered at the time but which had stayed with her. And in that moment, Miranda knew what her decision was. It had probably been made the moment Zeke's arms had closed around her in the blizzard, when his voice had promised her she would be safe. She had just been too scared to acknowledge it until now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pratt," she said, turning to face him fully. "I can't marry you. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. You deserve someone who can be fully committed to you, and I can't be that person." Howard's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake. You're throwing away security for some romantic notion that won't last past the first hard winter or the first real fight." "Maybe," Miranda acknowledged, "but it's my mistake to make. I'm sorry for any inconvenience this causes you. I'll pay you back for any expenses you incurred on my behalf." "Keep your money," Howard said bitterly. "I don't want it, but don't come crying to me when you realize what a fool you've been." He turned and stalked back toward his horse, mounted, and rode off without another word. Miranda watched him go, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. Then she felt Zeke's hand slide into hers, warm and solid and real. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because if you're not, I'll ride after him right now and bring him back." Miranda turned to face him, and for the first time in years she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I'm sure. I'm terrified, but I'm sure." Zeke's face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious expression, making him look years younger. "Don't be terrified, I've got you. I'll always find you, remember." "I remember," Miranda said, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her, and it was nothing like she had ever imagined a kiss could be. It was warmth and promise and homecoming all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rosie was standing on the porch clapping her hands together. "About time. Now, come inside before you both catch your death of cold out here." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Miranda's life. She and Zeke were married in Winslow by a circuit judge just 3 weeks after the snowstorm that had brought them together. It was a small ceremony, attended by Rosie, Maria, the ranch hands, and a few of Zeke's friends from town. Miranda wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric. Zeke had bought her as a gift, a beautiful deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. Their wedding night was spent in the ranch house that would now be her home, in the master bedroom that had been Zeke's alone for so many years. He was gentle and patient, aware that this was new territory for her, and Miranda felt herself falling even deeper in love with this man who had quite literally saved her life, and then given her a reason to truly live. As winter gave way to spring, Miranda settled into her new role as mistress of the Xerxes Ranch. She worked alongside Rosie in the house, learning how to manage the household, how to preserve food for the winter, how to handle the various crises that arose on a working ranch. She also began helping Zeke with the business side of things, using her education to help him with bookkeeping and correspondence. She discovered she had a head for numbers and logistics, and Zeke was happy to share the responsibilities with her. She also learned about Zeke himself, about the depths of his character that had only been hinted at during those first intense days. He was passionate about his work, but also capable of great tenderness. He had a strong sense of justice and fairness that guided all his dealings. He was fiercely protective of those he cared about, but also respected Miranda's independence and intelligence. He made her laugh with his dry humor and made her feel cherished with his actions, both grand and small. There were difficult moments, too. Learning to live with another person, to navigate disagreements and differences in perspective, was not always easy. Zeke could be stubborn, and Miranda had a temper she had learned to suppress over the years that occasionally flared up. But they learned to talk through their problems, to compromise, to remember what they meant to each other when frustration threatened to overwhelm affection. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the ranch, Zeke said, "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me over the security Howard could have given you?" Miranda turned to look at him, surprised. "Never, not once. Why would you ask that?" he shrugged, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Sometimes I worry that I asked too much of you, that I pushed you into a decision you weren't ready to make." Miranda took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Zeke, you didn't push me into anything. You gave me a choice. For the first time in my adult life, someone presented me with a real choice, not just the illusion of one. You offered me love and partnership, and I took it. I will never regret that." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Miranda Xerxes." "And I love you," she replied, feeling the truth of it in every fiber of her being. As the year turned and winter approached again, Miranda found herself thinking about the anniversary of the storm that had changed her life. She mentioned it to Zeke one evening in mid-November. "Has it really only been a year?" he mused, pulling her close. "It feels like you've always been here." "In the best way, I hope," Miranda teased. "In the absolute best way." He paused, then said, "I have something for you. An anniversary present, I suppose, though the storm isn't exactly an anniversary we usually celebrate." He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and handed it to her. Miranda opened it to find a delicate silver locket inside. She opened it and saw that it contained two tiny photographs, one of her and one of Zeke. "I had them made when we went into Winslow last month," Zeke explained. "I wanted you to have something to wear close to your heart. Something to remind you that no matter where you are, I'll always find you." Miranda felt tears prick her eyes as she lifted the locket from the box. "It's beautiful. Help me put it on." Zeke fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. Miranda touched the locket, feeling its weight, its significance. "I love it," she said, turning to kiss him. "I love you, and I love you," he replied. "Always." That night, as snow began to fall outside, gentle and beautiful unlike the deadly storm of the previous year, Miranda and Zeke made love with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the months of their marriage. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Miranda found herself thinking about the future. "Zeke," she said softly, "what do you think about children?" She felt him shift, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "Children? You mean our children?" "Well, I hope our children," she said with a slight smile. "I wouldn't want them to be anyone else's." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I think about them often, actually. I'd love to have children with you, Miranda, a whole house full of them if you're willing. I want sons to teach about ranching and daughters to spoil. I want our children to grow up here, to know this land and love it the way I do, to know they're part of something bigger than themselves." "That sounds wonderful," Miranda said, feeling a wave of contentment wash over her. "I hope we're blessed with that." "We will be," Zeke said with quiet confidence. "Everything else has worked out better than I could have imagined. Why not this too?" As it turned out, Zeke's confidence was justified. By the following spring, Miranda was pregnant with their first child. The pregnancy was not easy, with morning sickness that lasted well past the first few months, and a summer heat that seemed particularly oppressive when carrying extra weight. But Zeke was attentive and patient, adjusting her workload, making sure she had everything she needed, and generally treating her like she was made of spun glass. "I'm not going to break," Miranda told him one afternoon in late summer when he insisted she sit down after she had been on her feet for all of 20 minutes. "I know that," Zeke said, but his eyes were worried. "I just want to take care of you." Miranda softened, reaching up to cup his face. "You do take care of me, every day. But I also need to feel useful to feel like myself. Let me find my own limits, all right," he nodded reluctantly, and they found a balance that worked for both of them. Miranda continued to help around the ranch as much as she could, and Zeke learned to let her do so without hovering quite so obviously. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1897, after a long and difficult labor that left both Miranda and Zeke exhausted. But when Rosie placed the squalling infant in Miranda's arms, all the pain and fear melted away. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like his father and blue eyes that would eventually settle into the same gray-blue as Zeke's. "What should we name him?" Miranda asked, looking up at Zeke, who was staring at his son with an expression of such wonder and love that it made her heart ache. "How about Josiah?" "After my father, Josiah Xerxes," Miranda said, testing the name. "It's perfect." Zeke reached out a tentative finger to touch his son's tiny hand, and Josiah's fingers immediately wrapped around it, holding tight. Zeke's face crumpled for a moment, overwhelmed with emotion. "He's so small," he whispered. "How can something so small be so perfect?" "The same way something so unexpected can change your entire life," Miranda said, thinking of the snowstorm, of the moment everything had changed. They settled into their new life as parents, learning as they went. Josiah was a colicky baby who seemed to cry more than he slept, especially at night. Miranda and Zeke took turns walking him, singing to him, trying everything to soothe him. It was exhausting and frustrating and wonderful all at once. One night, when Josiah was about 3 months old and going through a particularly difficult spell, Miranda was near tears from exhaustion. Zeke took the baby from her gently. "Go to bed," he said firmly. "I'll handle him tonight." "But you have to be up early tomorrow to check the north pasture," Miranda protested, "and I will be. But right now you need sleep." "Go," Miranda was too tired to argue. She stumbled to their bed and was asleep within minutes. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and she could hear Zeke's voice coming from the parlor, low and rhythmic. She got up and padded quietly to the doorway. Zeke was sitting in the rocking chair that had been his mother's, Josiah sleeping peacefully in his arms. He was talking to their son in a low voice, telling him about the ranch, about the work they would do together someday, about how loved he was. "Your mama is the strongest person I know," Zeke was saying. "She survived a storm that would have killed most people. She took a chance on a stranger because she trusted her heart. And now she's given me you, which makes me the luckiest man alive. You're going to grow up knowing what it means to love and be loved, Josiah. That's the greatest gift we can give you." Miranda felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. She stepped into the room and Zeke looked up, smiling when he saw her. "Good morning," he said softly. "Feel better?" "So much better." "How long has he been asleep?" "About an hour. I think he finally wore himself out. I was just about to put him in his cradle." Miranda came to sit on the arm of the rocking chair, leaning against Zeke as they both looked down at their sleeping son. "We're really doing this," she said. "We're really parents. We really are," Zeke agreed. "And we're going to be great at it, together." "Together," Miranda echoed, and she knew it was true. Whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. As Josiah grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Zeke expanded his cattle operation, and Miranda took on more of the bookkeeping and business correspondence, discovering she had a real talent for negotiation. They made a formidable team, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other through weaknesses. When Josiah was 2 years old, Miranda found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring day in 1899, arriving quickly and with far less drama than her brother had. She had Miranda's brown hair and Zeke's smile, and they named her Rose after Rosie, who had become like family to them both. "2 children before I'm 30, Miranda said one evening, sitting on the porch with Zeke while the children slept inside. "I never imagined this would be my life." "Are you happy?" Zeke asked, though she could hear the certainty in his voice. He knew the answer, but he liked to hear it anyway. "I'm happier than I ever thought possible," Miranda replied honestly. "There are hard days, of course. Days when the children are sick or fussy, when money is tight because the cattle prices are down, when we disagree about something, and I wonder how we'll work through it. But even on those days, I'm grateful. Grateful for you, for our children, for this life we've built." Zeke pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land that was now truly theirs in every sense of the word. The years passed with a quickness that surprised Miranda. Josiah grew into a serious, responsible boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the business of ranching with an eagerness that made Zeke's chest swell with pride. Rose was more spirited, with a mischievous streak that kept Miranda on her toes but also made her laugh more than she had ever laughed in her life. In 1902, their third child arrived, another boy they named Thomas. He was a happy, easy baby, so different from the colicky infant Josiah had been. By this time, Miranda and Zeke had settled fully into their roles as parents, handling the challenges and joys of raising children with confidence born of experience. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Zeke's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread, and he began to be sought out for advice by other ranchers in the area. Miranda's business acumen proved invaluable, and together, they made decisions that ensured the ranch's success, even during difficult economic times. Through it all, their love for each other continued to deepen. It was no longer the wild, passionate, uncertain love of those early days, though the passion certainly remained. It had matured into something richer and more complex, a love built on shared experiences, on weathering storms both literal and figurative, on choosing each other day after day, year after year. One cold November evening, as they sat by the fire after the children had been put to bed, Zeke said, "Do you remember the anniversary is coming up, the storm?" Miranda said immediately. "How could I forget? It will be 10 years this month." 10 years, Zeke mused. "A decade since I found you half frozen in the snow, certain you were going to die. And instead, you saved me, in more ways than one." Zeke reached over and took her hand. "I've been thinking about that day a lot lately. About all the things that had to happen exactly right for us to end up together. If the storm had hit a few hours later, you would have already been in Winslow. If I had decided to check a different fence line, I never would have found you. If you had given up and stopped walking, I might have missed you in the snow. But none of those things happened," Miranda said. "The storm came when it did, you checked the fence line you did, and I kept walking. We found each other, Zeke, or maybe you found me and I found myself." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I love you, Miranda. I've loved you for 10 years, and I'll love you for 10 times 10 more if we're lucky enough to have that long." "I love you too," Miranda said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for tracking me through that storm. Thank you for finding me." "I'll always find you," Zeke replied, his voice steady and sure. "That's my promise. No matter what storms come, literal or otherwise, I'll always find you." They renewed that promise to each other on the 10th anniversary of the storm, in a private ceremony in their bedroom with only each other as witnesses. It was a reaffirmation of vows they had never truly needed to speak aloud because they lived them every day. As the years continued to pass, their family grew once more with the arrival of their fourth child, a daughter named Catherine, born in 1905. With 4 children, the ranch house that had once seemed so large and quiet was now filled with noise and laughter and the chaos of family life. Josiah, now a young man of 16, was already a skilled rancher, working alongside his father with a maturity beyond his years. Rose, at 13, was beautiful and headstrong, already attracting attention from boys in town, much to Zeke's consternation and Miranda's amusement. Thomas, at 10, was the peacemaker of the family, always ready with a joke or a kind word when tensions ran high. And little Catherine, at 3, was the darling of the family, spoiled by her older siblings and adored by her parents. Rosie had grown old but was still sharp as a tack, now spending most of her time in a comfortable chair by the fire, dispensing wisdom and telling stories to the grandchildren she had never had but whom she loved as though they were her own blood. Maria had married one of the ranch hands and had children of her own, but she still helped around the house, and her children played with Miranda and Zeke's youngest. The ranch had grown to be one of the most successful in the territory, and when Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Zeke was asked to serve on various committees and boards. He declined most of them, preferring to focus on his family and his land, but he did agree to serve on the school board, wanting to ensure that all children in the area had access to quality education. Miranda found her own ways to contribute to the community. She organized a sewing circle that met monthly, which became as much a social support network for the women in the area as it was about sewing. She also began teaching some of the ranch hands' children to read and write, discovering that she had a gift for teaching. Their marriage continued to be the foundation on which everything else was built. They still had disagreements, still had moments of frustration with each other. But they had learned long ago how to navigate those moments, how to communicate, how to forgive, how to remember what was truly important. One evening in the summer of 1914, as they celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary, Zeke presented Miranda with a gift. It was a painting of the ranch, beautifully rendered by an artist he had commissioned from Tucson. "I wanted you to have something that captured this place, our home," he explained. "Something that shows what we've built together." Miranda studied the painting, taking in every detail: the house, the barn, the distant mountains, the cattle grazing in the fields. But what struck her most was the warmth the artist had managed to convey, the sense that this was not just a place but a home, filled with love and life and history. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Zeke." "Thank you," he replied, pulling her close. "For taking a chance on me all those years ago. For building this life with me. For being my partner in every sense of the word." Miranda thought back to that terrified young woman stumbling through the snow, convinced she was going to die alone in the cold. She could never have imagined then that she would end up here, surrounded by love and family, mistress of a successful ranch, wife to a man who still made her heart race after nearly 2 decades of marriage. "I would do it all again," she said firmly. "Every moment, every decision. It all led me here to you, to this life. I would choose you 1,000 times over, Zeke Xerxes." He kissed her then, deep and long, a kiss that held within it all the love and passion and commitment of their years together. As World War I raged in Europe, touching even their small corner of Arizona as young men from the area enlisted and shipped out. The Xerxes family remained a constant source of stability and love. Josiah, now 23, managed much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing Zeke to take on more of an advisory role. He had grown into a fine young man, serious and responsible, and Miranda knew it was only a matter of time before he brought home a wife of his own. Rose, at 20, was engaged to be married to a young lawyer from Winslow, much to her father's mixed feelings. Zeke liked the young man well enough, but the thought of giving away his daughter was harder than he had expected. Miranda helped him navigate those feelings, reminding him that this was the natural order of things and that they would always be Rose's parents, no matter whom she married. Thomas, at 17, was considering going to college to study agriculture, wanting to bring new ideas and techniques back to the ranch. It was a source of great pride for both Miranda and Zeke that their children had the opportunities and options that neither of them had really had at that age. Catherine, at 12, was still young enough to be at home, though she was already showing signs of the independent spirit that ran through all their children. One winter evening, as Miranda and Zeke sat alone in their parlor after the children had all gone to bed, a snowstorm began to rage outside. It was the first major storm of the season, and as they listened to the wind howl, they looked at each other and smiled. "It reminds me of that first storm," Miranda said softly, "the one that brought me here." "I think about it too," Zeke admitted. "Every time it snows like this, I remember what it felt like to find you out there, half frozen, the terror I felt that I might be too late. The relief when you opened your eyes and I knew you were going to be all right. And then the confusion when I realized I was falling in love with you," Miranda added with a smile. "It was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I had ever experienced." Zeke moved to sit beside her on the sofa, pulling her close. "I meant what I said all those years ago, you know. I'll always find you, Miranda, in this life and whatever comes after. You're my North Star, my constant. As long as I can find you, I can find my way home." Miranda turned to kiss him, tasting the coffee he had been drinking and something else, something uniquely Zeke. Even after all these years, his kiss could still make her heart race and her stomach flutter. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." "Forever," Zeke agreed. "That's exactly how long I plan to keep loving you." They sat together as the storm raged outside, warm and safe and surrounded by the life they had built together. Miranda thought about that frightened young woman on the stagecoach, heading toward an uncertain future with a man she had never met. She thought about the choice she had made, the leap of faith that had brought her here. She would never regret it, not for a single moment. Because sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes you had to get lost in a storm to find your way home. And sometimes love found you when you least expected it, in the form of a cowboy on horseback who promised he would always find you. And Zeke had kept that promise. Through 19 years of marriage, through the birth of 4 children, through good times and bad, through disagreements and reconciliations, through illness and health, through every storm, both literal and figurative, he had always found her. And she had always found him. As the years rolled on into the 1920s, the Xerxes Ranch continued to thrive under the joint leadership of Zeke and Josiah. Miranda took great joy in watching her eldest son step fully into his role as a rancher, seeing so much of his father in him. Josiah had married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth in 1918, and by 1922 they had given Miranda and Zeke 3 grandchildren, with another on the way. Rose and her husband, Andrew, lived in Winslow, where he practiced law and she was active in various civic organizations. They had 2 children, and Rose often brought them out to the ranch for visits, saying she wanted them to know their roots, to understand where they came from. Thomas had indeed gone to college and had returned with his degree and a passion for sustainable ranching practices. He worked alongside his father and brother, implementing new techniques that increased the ranch's productivity while also being mindful of the land's long-term health. He had married his college sweetheart, a smart, practical woman named Helen who fit seamlessly into the family. Catherine, at 19, was the only one still at home, though she was being courted by a young veterinarian from Flagstaff who made frequent trips to Winslow for the express purpose of seeing her. Zeke grumbled about it, but Miranda could see the smile in his eyes. He loved that his children had found good partners, even if it was hard to let them go. Rosie had passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1920, at the age of 82. Her death had hit the family hard, but they had celebrated her life with a service that was attended by nearly everyone in the county. She had been buried in the family plot on the ranch, and Miranda visited her grave regularly, telling her about the children and grandchildren, and thanking her for her wisdom and love all those years ago. As Miranda and Zeke entered their 50s, they began to think about slowing down, about transitioning more of the ranch's operations to Josiah and Thomas. They did not want to retire completely, but they wanted time to enjoy their grandchildren, to travel a bit, to simply be together without the constant demands of running a large operation. One evening in late 1925, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Zeke said, "We've had a good life, haven't we?" "The best life," Miranda agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was that scared young woman on a stagecoach heading into the unknown." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had married Howard Pratt?" Miranda considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, in an abstract way, I imagine my life would have been fine in a practical sense. I would have had security, a home, probably children. But I don't think I would have had this." She gestured to encompass not just the ranch, but everything it represented, their family, their love, their partnership. "I don't think I would have had joy." Zeke reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing the familiar contours of her palm. "I'm grateful every day that you chose me, that you took the risk." "It was never really a risk," Miranda said. "Not once I met you. My heart knew immediately, even if my head took a little longer to catch up." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of knowing someone so well that words are often unnecessary. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "Zeke," Miranda said after a while. "When we're old and gray, and our children have taken over the ranch completely, what do you want to do?" He thought about it for a moment. "I want to sit right here on this porch with you. I want to watch our grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren play in that yard. I want to tell them stories about how their grandmother survived a blizzard and how I was the luckiest man in the world when I found her. And I want to hold your hand and know that everything we built together." Miranda felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "That sounds perfect, doesn't it?" Zeke squeezed her hand gently. "That's the future I want, Miranda, simple and full of love. That's all I've ever wanted, really. You and love and family." "Then that's what we'll have," Miranda promised, and they did. As the years continued to pass, as their children's children grew and had children of their own, as the ranch adapted to the changing times of the early 20th century, Miranda and Zeke remained at the heart of it all. They were the foundation, the constant, the example of what a true partnership could be on a cold November evening in 1936, Exactly 40 years after the storm that had changed everything, Miranda and Zeke sat together in their bedroom. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the years, but their love for each other had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by time and experience and the shared journey of a life well lived. 40 years, Miranda marveled. Has it really been 40 years since you found me in that storm? 40 years since I found you, Zeke agreed. And 39 years since you made me the happiest man alive by agreeing to be my wife. You know what I remember most about that day? Miranda asked. Not the cold or the fear, though those were certainly overwhelming. What I remember most is the sound of your voice cutting through the wind, telling me to hold on, that we were almost there. It was the first time I felt truly safe in years, maybe ever. Zeke pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. And I remember thinking when I first saw you in that storm that I had to save you, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because somehow I knew you were meant to be saved by me. That sounds foolish, I suppose. It doesn't sound foolish at all, Miranda said. It sounds like fate, like everything in both our lives led us to that exact moment in that exact place. I told you that day that I would always find you, Zeke said, and I've kept that promise. You have, Miranda agreed. Through every storm, every challenge, every moment of doubt or fear, you've always found me. You've always been my constant. They sat together as darkness fell outside, warm and comfortable, and surrounded by the evidence of their life together. Photographs lined the walls and filled the mantel, showing their children at various ages, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. The ranch had grown and prospered, but more importantly, their family had grown and prospered. You have any regrets? Zeke asked. Miranda thought about it seriously, then shook her head. Not a single one. I have lived a life filled with love and purpose and family. I have been cherished and challenged and supported. I have had the privilege of being your wife, of raising our children, of building this life with you. How could I regret any of that? I feel the same way, Zeke said. You have been the great joy of my life, Miranda, you and the family we created together. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Miranda thought about the young woman she had been 40 years ago, desperate and frightened and willing to marry a stranger for security. She thought about the choice she had made, the risk she had taken, the leap of faith that had led her here. She had chosen love over security, passion over practicality, her heart over her head, and that choice had given her everything. I love you, Zeke Xerxes, she said softly. I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Miranda Xerxes, he replied, his voice steady and sure. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I'll always find you, no matter what storms may come. That's my promise, today and always. They sealed that promise with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of the love of 4 decades. And as they held each other close, Miranda knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, exactly where she had always been meant to be from the moment that cowboy on horseback had appeared out of a blizzard and said those words that would define the rest of her life. I'll always find you. And he had. Again and again and again, through every storm, through every challenge, through every moment of joy and sorrow, he had always found her, and she had always found him. That was love, Miranda thought. Real, true, lasting love. Not the romantic fantasy of perfection, but the everyday reality of choosing someone again and again, through good times and bad. It was the promise to always find each other, no matter how lost they might become. As the years continued forward into the late 1930s and early 1940s, Miranda and Zeke finally did step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. leaving it firmly in the capable hands of Josiah and Thomas. They remained advisors and occasional helpers, but mostly they enjoyed their well-earned rest. They traveled a bit, taking a trip to California to see the ocean, something Miranda had always wanted to do. They visited Rose and Andrew in Winslow regularly. They spoiled their grandchildren and great-grandchildren shamelessly. And mostly, they simply enjoyed being together, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful from that chance encounter. When Zeke passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1948 at the age of 79, Miranda was devastated. They had been married for 49 years, together for nearly 50, and the loss of him felt like losing part of herself. But as she stood at his grave, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them mourning the patriarch who had loved them so well, Miranda found comfort in knowing that they had had a full life together. They had loved deeply, raised a family, built a legacy that would continue for generations. She stayed on at the ranch for several more years, enjoying her family, telling stories about Zeke to the youngest great-grandchildren who had never known him. And when she passed away quietly in her sleep in 1953 at the age of 77, her children buried her next to Zeke in the family plot on the ranch they had built together. On her headstone, below her name and dates, they carved the words that had defined her life. She was lost in a storm and he found her. Together they built a love that lasted forever. The Xerxes Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Miranda and Zeke had laid. And on cold November nights when the snow fell and the wind howled, the family would gather by the fire and tell the story of how it all began. They would tell about the mail-order bride who had been lost in a snowstorm for hours, frightened and certain she was going to die. They would tell about the cowboy who had been checking his fence line and had seen a figure in the snow. They would tell about how he tracked her through the blizzard and said those words that would echo through the generations. "I'll always find you." And they would tell about the love that grew from that moment, a love that had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and ultimately created a family and a legacy that would endure long after both lovers had passed from this world. Because that was the power of true love, the kind of love that Miranda and Zeke had shared. It did not end with death. It lived on in the children they had raised, in the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values. It lived on in the ranch they had built together, in every fence post and every blade of grass. It lived on in the stories told on cold winter nights, in the lessons passed down from generation to generation. It lived on because love, real love, never truly dies. It transforms, it evolves, but it endures. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Miranda and Zeke found each other again. Because he had promised, all those years ago in a snowstorm in November of 1896, that he would always find her. And Zeke Xerxes was a man who kept his promises. Always.